Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome commission members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, and online listeners to the March 12th, 2020 monthly meeting of the North Carolina Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. This commission develops and recommends to the State Board of Education rules related to all aspects of educator preparation, programs, and licensure. My name is Patrick Miller. I'm the chairman of the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website, www.ncpublicschools.org, on the SBE meetings link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the eBoard agenda. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Commission members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this commission. Does any member of the commission know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If, during the course of the meeting, you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Ladies and gentlemen, at this particular time, we do not yet have a quorum, so we will circle back through if we reach a quorum to approve the agenda and the minutes, but we will jump right into the DPI updates, and we'll start with Dr. Kimberly Evans.
Good morning, everyone. My first update has to do with the middle school science praxis test. That was an update in the test code and also an update in the cut score. And that was approved unanimously by the State Board of Education this past month. In addition, there was an update, an extension of time for the teacher compensation and advanced teaching roles pilot program timeline for that RFP, and the new deadlines, which have already been communicated by Dr. Tomberlin to LEAs in the field for the local boards of education to submit their proposals, is now April 15th instead of March 15th, 2020, and the State Board of Education shall select a local school administrative unit for the pilot by June 15th, 2020. NCDPI will bring those recommendations to the State Board of Education during the June meeting, which is June 3rd and 4th. So anyone, I wanted to go back to the new deadline for April 15th. Any of the LEAs that have already submitted an application are allowed to go back and update that and resubmit an application if they so choose by the April 15th date. And my last update has to do with Teach NC. They have a new LEA submission period, and that starts on May 1st, 2020. And on the agenda, there's an attachment, and it has Princess Brown's contact information, and she is the one to contact if an LEA is interested in submitting their information to be on the Teach NC website. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, Dr. Seiberg.
That's fine. Good morning, committee members, commission members. So I want to give you an update on a couple of things that I presented to the board last week. This is the time of year that we report the annual EPP dashboard and effectiveness data. And we do that through an EPP performance report, which is everything in the kitchen sink, narrative responses, interaction with institutions, interaction with and service to the public schools, as well as the demographics and the characteristics of the candidate pools of the institutions. Then we also provide the teacher effectiveness and survey results on their preparedness to enter the classroom. So those performance reports, essentially, for those of you who are not up to speed with that, we basically start that in about May of the previous year. It takes us about 10 months to get them put together, so those are now ready to go. I presented them to the board last week, and then along with those performance reports, there's a report card, which is sort of a static 2-page version of what are the highlights associated with those performance reports. The hope is that the online dashboard that we're building will ultimately replace the report cards, but we're not quite there for this go-around. But those have been prepared statically as well, and they went to the board as well. If you go to the next slide. Just a quick reminder here, despite the fact that Pepsi and the board have been bantering around the idea of a weighted composite model associated with accountability for educator preparation programs, the fact that we do not have something that goes over to the JLEOC formally does not mitigate the fact that 107 still requires 3 performance measures to be looked at. And so to that end, we are working on the first online dashboard to be representing those accountability requirements. We did a presentation, which if time permits, we might share some of that today with you. We're pretty jam-packed with a ton of stuff today, so that's sort of a wait and see if we have time to do it. But essentially, we've been working with Dr. Andy Baxter to create this online dashboard. We're ready to turn the lights on that. And we're going to try and coincide the online dashboard at the same time that we formally approve the report cards and performance reports in April. And so that dashboard, effectively, we're putting a variety of stakeholders together, which we can include members of this commission as well, to be able to have access to that dashboard, to share input in development of dashboards going forward. While we're turning the lights on the accountability side first, Dr. Baxter has about another at least a dozen or so other measures that are essentially done. We just have to do some a little bit more vetting and some stakeholder input in those before they're made public. But the idea here is that we'll turn the lights on the accountability model in April. And we'll share that publicly. We'll put that on our website. And then as new dashboards are created and ready to be looked at, we'll share intermittent emails out with you all as stakeholders as well as other stakeholders in the field for feedback. And then we'll take that feedback, make updates, and then ultimately alert the board so that they can see that. And then when the board sees it and gives it the green light, then those will continue to populate the online dashboard. So you can think of it as a continuous rolling organic dashboard that will provide more and more data as we get further out in the coming 6 months or so. Could you go to the next slide? Let's go to the next one. Those slides are just reminding folks that the current accountability model requires that we look at EPP measures disaggregated to the subgroup population. So that means that the accountability is not just looked at overall, and this is work that Pepsi has done in the fall that ultimately was approved by the board around what's the minimum sample size, and if you don't meet that, what is the small group exception rule. I hope you all are remembering all that, but essentially I just reminded them that those rules were in place. And the reason that those things have importance is when we roll out the accountability dashboard, the online dashboard, those rules will dictate what is being shown. And so we will show, while accountability, that we're not issuing sanctions until 21-22, we will let EPPs know where they're falling short in the various accountability measures. So it will be public that there'll be information out there where institutions are not meeting standard. So that's going to have some real implications on pipeline, on communication, and that sort of thing. So we've talked to a variety of stakeholders about this, but I just wanted you all to know that your accountability rules associated with this process are incorporated into the online dashboard going forward. I think that's about it for that presentation. So again, if we have time, we'll branch out and show you a little bit more about the interactiveness of the dashboard, but I think you'll be really pleased with it. We expect that we will get you access to the dashboard probably in the next no later than 2 weeks out from now. It may be even just a week and a half at this point. So as soon as we get that, we'll zap that out to you via email so you have access to it.
Any questions for Dr. Seiberg? Hearing none, we will move along with the agenda. Dr. Tom Tomberlin will complete his updates later in the meeting. Now we'd like to welcome Dr. Shirley Prince. She's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association, NCPAPA, and she will present on the Transforming Principal Preparation Program called TP3. Dr. Prince.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Miller. I really appreciate that. And good morning to everyone who's in the room and also online. Thank you for allowing me to address this group. I think it's very important that this group know what has been going on with the Transforming Principal Preparation Program, especially since, as I heard in your opening remarks, Dr. Miller, that this body actually makes recommendations to the State Board of Education on matters pertaining to preparation and educators and that sort of thing. The Transforming Principal Preparation Program was approved in the 2015 session of the General Assembly, and it was in response to, first I would say, a principal shortage. Our superintendents were telling us that they were struggling to find really qualified and effective principals, especially for the challenges that they face today. And so that was kind of pervasive throughout the state, and not just in North Carolina. This was nationally. And our General Assembly had the foresight to put this program in place. And basically what it was designed to do is to create a competitive grant program, and the grantees would work on transforming principal preparation so that we could assure a steady supply of highly effective principals to lead our schools. The grant program, the legislation established the SEAA to be the manager, so to speak, of the Transforming Principal Preparation Program, and from now on I'll be referring to it as TP3 because it's a mouthful otherwise. And they authorized them to issue an RFP to identify a nonprofit to administer the grant program and to oversee the transformation process. The idea was they wanted someone removed from the typical traditional university setting to oversee the transformation process. We were one of the applicants. We responded to the RFP, and the North Carolina Alliance for School Leadership Development was selected to administer this program and oversee the transformation process. The North Carolina Alliance for School Leadership Development is a nonprofit, a 501c3, that serves as the foundation for the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association, the North Carolina Superintendents Association, and the North Carolina Association of School Administrators. The reason why I'm here today and why it is important for this group to hear what's been going on is that the legislation also stipulated that the State Board of Education would be making decisions about how to transform principal preparation across the state based on the recommendations that came out of the evaluation and the oversight of these grantees, these transformed principal preparation programs. And these recommendations, we're supposed to make them by September 15th to the State Board of Education. We're supposed to report to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee, and the State Board will be making their changes, if there are any, by November 15th and report to that body. Okay, next slide, thank you. One of the things that I think it's important to note that there are some, I guess, non-negotiables for this particular transformation process, and many of them were stipulated in the legislation. The number one, and I think really most important one, is the rigorous selection of principal interns. And that we wanted to get away from primarily a self-selection type situation that we had in our state. We wanted to go more toward a situation where the very best people were being identified and tapped for this opportunity. So there's a rigorous selection process, very strong, authentic partnerships between the preparation providers and the school districts. That's another essential element. Obviously, alignment to national standards, rigorous coursework linking theory with practice. And then one of the stipulations, one of the non-negotiables, was a fully released paid residency. We have found through the 4 years that we've been working with the providers that the residency really needs to be a fully paid residency. The legislation stipulated 5 months. It had to be at least 5 months in a school setting, an authentic school setting, with a strong mentor principal. Fully paid tuition and other program expenses, coaching from trained practitioners, and especially a focus on high-need schools and districts. So we had quite a few people, or rather institutions, providers, to apply when we issued our RFP. I feel really good about the process that we used to identify our original TP3 providers. We actually went to a third-party scoring process. It had a lot of integrity. We identified people outside of our organization, people that we felt could really give an unbiased view of these proposals. And beyond that, they helped us narrow it down to some finalists, and then we had interviews, and we ended up with these actually 5 programs. We had 2 for NC State. When the legislation was first passed, there was only $500,000 recurring funding in it for the grants. And so we selected, our very first program was NC State. They got a small grant of $500,000 for each year, each of the 2 years. But now we have 5 programs because NC State combined their 2 programs into one. So you see the programs there that make up the original TP3 grantees. This map shows how the districts are distributed across the state that these 5 grantees partner with. Okay, so in 2019, Senate Bill 227 was passed, and it established a new Principal Fellows and TP3 Commission. The idea was that we wanted to transition over the next couple of years and merge the funding streams, and really, in essence, the funding that it was established for Principal Fellows would eventually be used to fund more TP3 type programs. We continue to serve as the administrator for the 5 original TP3 programs during this year, and then next year we'll be serving 3 of the 5 programs. And then after June 30th, 2021, the transition will be complete, and all of the TP3 programs will be under the oversight of this newly established commission. There was money in the Principal Fellows Trust Fund, and the commission wanted to get that out into the field. And so last fall, they actually issued an RFP, and they selected 4 new grant awards to begin in 2021. Whoops, excuse me. All right, this shows how the funding is distributed. Now, when you include the Principal Fellows funding, there is the blue bars represent the original TP3 providers. There is, in legislation, there is $4.2 million recurring funds for TP3. In the Principal Fellows pot of money, there's about $3 million in recurring funds for Principal Fellows. So the trust fund money was used to award 4 new programs. And you will see that the NC State was awarded another program. The next new program, and I can actually announce those because they have been announced already through a press release. We have ECU, UNC Charlotte, and North Carolina Central. Those are the new programs that will begin July 2020. Okay, we have an ongoing independent evaluation. I have with me today Dr. Bill Crothers, who is with Grant Pros, Inc., and he and his organization have been our third-party evaluators since the inception of TP3, and they have been conducting a 3-tier evaluation. They evaluate us at North Carolina Alliance for School Leadership Development. They evaluate the actual funded programs, the TP3 programs, and they evaluate the TP3 participant outcomes. Just to give you an idea of the depth of the independent evaluation, they have been analyzing budgetary expenditures of NCASLD as well as the program providers, the program practices they've been analyzing in depth through site visits, observations, surveys, interviews, reports. They've been analyzing the graduation outcomes, the placements, the LEA satisfaction, and they actually publish mid-year and annual reports and sometimes interim reports based on need, based on what they're seeing, what they're finding, and those can all be found on our website, the North Carolina Alliance for School Leadership Development website. So some of the results so far. As of this date, 97 or 82% of the 118 graduates from the first funding cycle, and that was 2016-2018, have secured positions as principals in or assistant principals in North Carolina. I will tell you that I'm pretty sure almost all of them are assistant principals. Yes, Dr. Crothers said that's correct. We are expected to produce, at the end of this school year, we'll have a total of 244 graduates from this TP3 program. As of this date, 118 of the 244 have secured positions. We included that so that you would see that some of these individuals are actually, 21 of them are actually already in positions. They've secured positions before they can even get through their programs. That's how desperately they're needed. And as of this date, 108 of the 118 individuals are serving in high-need schools. Okay, just some of the data that's being collected that shows the quality of the program, you can see that there were surveys done of the graduates, and they rated selected program features very highly. On a 5-point scale, the range was 4.47 to 4.75. Also, the LEA representatives rate the programs very highly. 39 of the 41, or 95% of them, were satisfied or very satisfied with the program. And you can see that the mentoring principals also rate the program. On a 7-point scale, they rate it highly, 6.61 to 6.85. Executive coaches that work very closely with the participants, obviously, and the program features, they also rate the program highly, between 6.44 and 6.72 on a 7-point scale. However, I think it's worth noting that all through the legislation, there is reference to the importance of student outcomes, and obviously we all recognize that. What we are finding, and you will not be surprised by this, is that we have to have long-term evaluation to determine that, especially since most or all so far of our TP3 graduates are going into assistant principal positions where they do not have direct control over the conditions at the school that will result in the outcomes for the students. So long-term evaluation is very much needed. We have a mantra among our 5 original TP3 providers that we are focused on continuous improvement. We have a professional learning network that meets 3 to 4 times a year, and the project directors are in constant contact, and they work together. They meet even more than that, and they do presentations together. And one of the things that they have told us is that their time together as project directors is very meaningful to them, and that they learn so much from one another. And some of the things that they have learned throughout this transformation process is the importance of the candidate being held harmless during the internship. And today I have Dr. Rodney Shotwell, who is one of the superintendents partnering with the UNCG program. He's superintendent from Rockingham County. And I asked him to attend today to just share with you, since we're on this particular bullet, the importance of the candidates being held harmless. So I'd like to invite Dr. Shotwell to come and just share that with you.
Thank you, Dr. Prince. I'm actually here really for 2 different reasons to talk about why it's important for this hold harmless. Is that I'm actually a member of Principal Class 1. I'm not sure if there's anybody still left working in North Carolina from that class, because I think we're like on Class 26 or 27 now. But I can just tell you from being a participant in that program that we received a stipend at the beginning of each semester, and that was it. And it was $20,000 to be able to do everything that you needed to do. And I can just tell you that if it hadn't been for my lawn mowing business on the side, it would have been really hard to have made it from the time I graduated before I got paid for the first job. So one of the things that I did see with that program as it matured was making sure that people were going to at least get a certain salary, because you're wanting the very best to come into this program. And that's really what and that's really what Dr. Hewitt, UNCG, myself, and the other partnership schools with the P-Peers program thought it was really important to be able to do that, because in order to have the very best, they're not going to leave the classroom if they're going to make less money. And I just think that's something that I want everybody to take away today. Right now, we have in our cohort, the hold harmless payments for our folks in this current cohort is anywhere from $0 to $22,660 a year. And I know from the first year when we had the program that we were looking at that, because that was immediately the first question that a lot of the participants had. You know, am I going to make more, or, I mean, am I going to make the same at least or less? And so we worked it out. And so we do pay for FICA and the health insurance that goes along with this program. I think that it's also important to consider the retirement and the years of service to count. One of the things that I had wished that I had done, if I could go back and talk to myself 20-some years ago, would be when they said pay your retirement fund, your payment while you're out, do that. Because every year that you don't do it, it costs more and more money. And it does make a difference for them to be able to do that and also to count it as a year of service. But I'm really here just to tell you about the quality candidates and how important it is to be able to do this, because I'm in a economically distressed county. I'm in a Tier 1 county. In the Piedmont, we're one of only 2 in that region. And so trying to find folks to come and work in Rockingham County when we're competing with other supplements and other places, we have to grow our own. And growing our own has been very important. I have 3 folks that are either gone through the program or currently in the program. All 3 are currently working as an assistant principal. As a matter of fact, one of the 21 that they mentioned that's working this year, who haven't even finished the program yet, she is working at one of my high schools as we speak. So it is important that we had this, because that year-long internship is critical for them to really get the experience of what it feels like to be an assistant principal, because otherwise, trying to fit it in during your planning period or during the summer, you're going to be very limited in terms of what your experience can be. And I can just tell you that that year-long experience that I had way back in the day is just as relevant as it is today for our folks that are in the PPERS program. And I just want to leave this. Please, please, please make sure that we do the hold harmless and keep that in place. It is going to be a critical piece for us to select the very best to be able to go into the assistant principal and principalship ranks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shotwell. I thought it was very important to emphasize that first bullet, and it's because for what we have found is holding the candidates harmless is what sets apart us being able to get the better candidates, and it's what really truly makes the program transformational. You know, other countries like Finland and Singapore, they identify their best and their brightest who have the propensity to lead adults, and they support them in their preparation. And I think in the spirit of this legislation, that's what we should be doing. You see the other things there on that slide that we have worked on, and we feel really good about the improvements that we've made and where we have gotten to at this point in the transformation process. Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do more quickly is talk about the commonalities in the program and then talk about the differences in the programs. And I think it's important for you to understand and see these things, because eventually you'll be making some recommendations on how to scale these programs across the state. So commonalities, obviously, you see there, like I've said, program leadership, rigorously selected candidates, LEA partnerships, cohort. They actually participate in a cohort group. All of the programs have either a master's at the end of the program or an add-on requirement. If they already have a master's, they can just get an add-on. Also, the authentic hands-on learning, emphasis on instructional leadership and equity, high-need schools, that's across all of the programs. Full-time paid clinical internships. They're not all fully paid, but they are all full-time. And everyone focusing on continuous improvement. Some commonalities in the way the funds are used. TP3 funds are being used to supplement the participants' salaries during the internships. And they're also being used to pay for tuition and fees. And they're being used to pay for all the extracurricular activities, to pay for the coaches. There are some differences, and they relate to the way the programs are accessing another pot of money. If Tom Tumberland were here, he would be very familiar with this. There is a pot of money that is available to full-time graduate students, and it pays their salary at a beginning AP salary of $41,650 during their 10-month internship. And the reason that is important is because that's why the hold harmless kicks in. Many of the teachers that are being selected for this program are nationally board certified, or they have 10, 12, 15 years of experience, and they make more than a beginning AP. So that is why the salaries are having to be supplemented so that they don't earn less than they did the previous year. In the 2016-18 funding cycle, our only program that accessed those funds was North Carolina State. In the 18-20 funding cycle, 3 of our programs are accessing that $41,650 and then supplementing from the TP3 funds. That's NC State, UNCG, and Western Carolina. Next funding cycle, I feel sure that all of the TP3 programs will be accessing the MSA salary fund to give that $41,650 toward the salary and then supplementing with TP3 funds. So there are differences in the way the funds are being used that I think this body needs to pay close attention to. The original TP3 programs are really pretty similar. They have primarily the same features, and so far they're getting primarily the same outcomes, very insignificant differences. However, their cost per student has ranged over the 4 years from $40,000 per student to $130,000 per student when you count the MSA state salary funds that are also being used to support the student. Also, a big difference is the way the programs are distributing their funding for institutional expenses as opposed to participant expenses. And you will see that there is a range of 25% for institutional expenses, all the way up to 59% for institutional expenses. So if you look at the average cost per student from the first funding cycle, you will see that the blue bars are just counting the TP3 funds. But then there were 2 programs, 2 of the NC State programs that also accessed the $41,650. So you can see the total cost per student from state funds, not counting what the district is paying, just the TP3 and also the MSA funds. That is, you can see a range of about $40,000 to about $130,000, or $130,000. Okay, then for this particular funding cycle, and we have gotten these numbers from their proposed budgets, and most everyone is following their proposed budgets pretty closely. You will see that there is a difference between 52.6 to 120,387. All right, so institutional expenses. Our evaluators actually determined that for institutional expenses, they were going to count salaries and fringe benefits for the institutional employees, plus their travel, plus contracted services to support operations, the coaches, and indirect cost. The participant expenses were going to be the salaries and fringe benefits for the internship to replace the salary, that's for the actual candidate. The university tuition costs, even though that goes back to the institution, that's still supporting the participant through a cost that they would have to incur otherwise. Support provided to the LEAs, and then participant travel. This slide prepared by Grant Pro shows the difference in the institutional expenses as opposed to the participant expenses. This slide shows what really makes up the big variance in that. And you can see that there is a big difference in the amount that is going toward salaries and benefits for university program staff. You see a high of $926,500 to a low of almost $39,000. I have with me today Emily Simeon, Dr. Emily Simeon, who is with the Sandhills Regional Educational Consortium. They have a salary and benefits for their program staff that is fairly low and kind of middle of the road, I would say. Maybe definitely on the low side, though. And I wanted her to come and just talk to you about how they structure their program so that you can see some of what they're able to get done. Emily?
Thank you, Dr. Miller, members, and Dr. Prince. I am with the Sandhills Grant Program, and we operate ours a little bit differently from the university-supported programs. When we first wrote our grant, when we began writing the grant, we sought a partner from a Sandhills University and actually met with university groups to talk about innovative methods of delivering our work and to be able to change the way our principles were essentially developed. And the one school that was so eager to work with us was UNCP, and they said, we'll do whatever you need. We'll adjust our curriculum, we'll work with you to adjust the activities that support the curriculum, and we'll do anything that you would like us to do to make this program stronger. So we immediately forged a relationship with UNCP, which has continued to be outstanding. And I particularly appreciate Dr. Charles Jenkins and Dr. Olivia Oxendine, who have been vital to continuing our program and being liaisons to the university to make sure that we did everything that was necessary. Excuse me. Each year and we are now we're on cohort 5, and we're accepting applications for cohort 6. Each year even though we wrote our grant as an add-on licensure program, we encourage our folks to complete the MSA. And we tell them that if they have a master's, they can use it as an add-on. We front load all the licensure courses. If they do not have a master's, then they have to complete the MSA. But what has happened is that we have typically graduated in December at least 20 MSA candidates from our own program, and then additional candidates in May. So the vast majority of our group is completing the MSA, even when some of them already have 1 or 2 masters. So each cohort we have a couple of people who are getting their 3rd masters through our program, and many of them who are receiving the 2nd. It was extremely important to us when we wrote the grant to make sure that we focused our funding on the interns. We wanted to make sure that the bulk of our money was put in support of the interns in salaries, tuition, books, fees, and all activities that would support them within the program. So we pay from grant funds the full salary. We reimburse the LEA for the full salary of the intern, including all benefits, which would also include the insurance, health insurance, and retirement. The only thing we don't pay is the local supplement, but everything else we pay, because it was very important to us for a person to be able to maintain the health insurance. If these interns were working with us and they couldn't pay their their insurance, and they didn't have insurance, and if they realized they're losing a year of retirement, that was going to divert their focus from what we wanted. So we cover all of that to make sure that they are fully focused and accountable to the program that we're giving them. We put as little as possible into administrative cost. I work as a program coordinator, and then we have 2 executive coaches, and that is the staff. Our program is governed by the Superintendent's Council, which is a little bit different from some of the others. Our Superintendent's Council hears an update every month during their meetings with the executive director for the RESA, who then communicates to our staff comments from our superintendents, any change in direction that we are needed, and then we work closely with the LEAs on what our interns need. Our coaches spend 35 to 40 hours a month with our interns during the fall semester when they're doing their internships. We do have a 5-month internship, and our coaches are very integrated into the intern process. We have an 8-hour seminar every Wednesday in the fall internship, and the coaches and I are there the entire time working with the interns. Then the coaches also follow up with 2 sessions each month in the school, and that could last from 1 to 2 hours in each session. They're not drop-by visits, they are actually problem-solving and follow-up sessions to our seminars, so they become a very important session every other week. Our focus is on the executive standards for school administrators, and we are very careful to make sure that we follow these standards and apply all of our activities toward those. My role is to implement the application and selection process as the program coordinator to make sure that we select the right interns. And our intern process, our selection process, is that we do have a consistent application that goes to the LEAs. The LEAs all take these applications and interview members who submit the applications, and then each LEA, we gave a list of suggested activities, and because our LEAs are so many different sizes, and one LEA might have 35 applicants while another one might have 5, they structure their activities sometimes a little differently to meet the needs of that particular LEA. But in the end, the person from the LEA who is recommended, and each LEA can recommend one person to us with another in reserve in case we have some space. But the person who is recommended is essentially tapped by the superintendent and the leadership team. So this is somebody that the leadership team, in coordination with the superintendent, says that they would like to have as a principal in their district. So they're not sending just someone who raises their hand and says, I want to get a master's and have it paid for. Instead, they are sending someone that they want to groom as an administrator, and they can see that that person would make a good principal within the district. We take that responsibility very seriously, and then we work closely with the LEA and the superintendent to make sure we are supporting and bolstering that particular intern wherever they need it. In addition, in my work, I work with to develop all of the mentor trainings and to help the schools actually select their schools and their mentors for our individual interns based on the intern needs. I'm working with the fiscal agents regarding the invoices and payments and assisting the LEAs with any changes that need to be made, with any adjustments or addendums. In my role, it's pretty much I do all the paperwork, excuse me, and assisting our budget person, as well as providing information to the evaluators, planning the seminars weekly to make sure that a full day meets the executive standards, and then assisting our coaches with task stream items and serving as a liaison with UNCP to make sure that our grant requirements are met as well as UNCP's requirements are met, so that we develop an intern who is really ready with authentic, strong practices to leave our program and go to work right away as an assistant principal, or if called, as a principal. And we are pleased that very recently, and as of this moment, we have 3 principals from our interns, with the majority of the remaining as assistant principals. Thank you.
Okay. Kim, thank you. All right. So then the amount of funding that, another difference, and these differences are important because you will be asked to make recommendations on scaling, is the amount that's going toward the participant's salary replacement. So you see the differences there. And by the way, you can actually calculate how much is going toward each student on average, because down in parentheses beside each provider's name, we have the number of students and the percentage of the total grant funds going toward this purpose. Thank you, Kim. All right, so basically on this side, what you see, and I'll just get to the bottom line, our evaluators actually did quite a bit of calculation, and they think that we would be safe in saying that an average per participant for salary is about $70,000, but that includes their local supplement, an average, their fringe benefits. It includes if they, 12 years of experience was what was used as the average. Also, National Board Certified. You see the difference there in bachelor's and master's degree. And we just kind of hit a middle point and said about $70,000 per participant is needed to hold an individual harmless. Next slide, thank you. So, emerging recommendations, and we say emerging because we have one more year to really analyze the results, particularly from the graduates that we have for this funding cycle. But we believe that to optimize the number of principal candidates that we end up serving, and to assure a more consistent return on investment when these programs are scaled, that we consider a cap on cost per student, and similar to federal grant programs, a cap on funds that can go toward institutional expenses. Next, we believe, I'm sorry, Kim, thank you. We believe that all of the programs need to hold their candidates harmless for their replacement salary and for the cost of tuition and fees. And we also recommend, or we are looking to recommend, that at least 200 principals be prepared through these funds, and that these funds be prioritized for the highest need schools. And it would require an additional $7 million in recurring funds just to prepare another 200 principals each year, but that would be if we had a cap on cost per student. We also recommend that the commission provide ongoing oversight and support and evaluation of these programs, that we continue an independent evaluation, and that we study the impact of the new forgivable loan requirement. We're very concerned about how that's going to affect the program, and we're just at the beginning stages of looking at that, and I won't go into those details at this point. And very important is another thing that we're looking at as a recommendation is the definition of high-need schools and districts. If we use the current definition, 80% of our schools are high needs, and 112 of our LEAs are high-need districts. So we're thinking that we may need to look at that and revise that for obvious reasons. Obviously, we need to be continuing to recruit minority candidates and establish funded programs in minority-serving universities. I'm pleased that the new commission awarded a grant to NC Central. And we believe that redesigning the MSA programs should continue so that more of the enhancement experiences are incorporated into the actual coursework. That should reduce the need for high personnel costs and extra costs that could be covered by tuition. And lastly, one of the observations that we are making, I'm sure that many of you read the Wallace-funded RAND study that was released probably last fall, I believe it was, or maybe even last spring. And it found that district-driven principal pipelines are very effective at improving student outcomes. You know, it's rare that we find a study that really links practices with improvement in student outcomes when it comes to principals. But this particular study found a direct link between the principal-driven principal pipelines, the district-driven principal pipelines, and increases in student achievement. So one of the emerging recommendations is that we believe we need to provide more support to our low-well school districts and consortiums of low-well school districts to fund district-driven pipeline initiatives, such as what you heard Dr. Simeon just describe. Those programs have a lot of district ownership. As in her program, the superintendents are actually the council that really runs this program. And we believe that the best place to initiate the pipeline of principals is in the district, where they can identify the best educators to be tapped for these opportunities. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has about anything that I've shared today. And I want to thank Dr. Simeon, Dr. Shotwell, Dr. Crothers for being here today.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Dr. Prince.
Sure.
Dr. Evans, can you take the roll now to check to see if we have quorum?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Bullock,
Here.
Dr. Dempsey,
Here.
Dr. Fleming, Dr. Fleming, there's a lot of background. He's on.
He's on.
Miss Janeski, Miss Morris,
Here.
Dr. Graham, Dr. Houston, Mrs. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Lockus,
Here.
Dr. Locklear, Dr. Marr,
Here.
Dr. Miller is here, Dr. Weddington, Dr. Wood,
Here.
Mr. Wallace. He's here too.
We have quorum.
We do.
Okay, we'll circle back and approve the agenda and the minutes. Commission members, you've had an opportunity to review the proposed agenda for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to formally approve the agenda for today's meeting?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the minutes have been approved. Thank you. The agenda, sorry. We'll do the minutes now. The minutes from our previous commission meeting, January 16th and February 13th, 2020, have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved.
Who made that first motion?
Wesley Wood.
Thank you.
Do we want to do Dr. Tomlin's updates now since he's here, or do we want Dr. Socks? Dr. Socks. We welcome Dr. Socks, Dr. Robert Socks. He's the Director of Educator Standards and Evaluation, and he's going to provide an update on the work of the Principal Standards Committee.
Thank you to the committee and those visitors here today. So the effort today is to give the commission an update on where the committee is in the work as the Pepsi Commission requested that we review and consider making recommendations for improvements to the principal standards. So if you'll go to that next slide. So we have a committee that came together based on this request. It represents principals as well as some assistant principals. We have superintendent voices, college and university voices, and other education partner voices on the committee. Because of the range of voices, we had to establish initially a baseline of why we're doing this. And so one of the first things this committee did when they came together on their very first day was work to respond to an if and then statement. And this is a consolidation of all of those groups. They worked in small groups, answered these questions, and then we consolidated that together. So to guide this work, this committee is operating under the idea that if the role of the principal is to lead schools in a manner that equips teachers, staff, and the school community with the necessary skills and resources to help all students grow and achieve appropriately, and the goal of the supervisor evaluator is to direct, lead, coach, and coach the principal through an annual continuous improvement cycle for leadership, which includes deployment, reflection, and assessment of the tasks and strengths to do so, then the North Carolina School Executive Standards need to describe the dispositions, competencies, and expectations at an appropriate level of specificity and granularity to foster clear targets and expectations for deploying, supervising, and evaluating effective school leadership. And effective school leadership brings you back to the top of this statement. So we came to agreement that that was the purpose of why we needed standards to start with. Click this next one twice. There you go. So the other thing we had to establish is that standards for evaluating any professional, specifically in education, need to have two unique things that they are supporting. And those two unique functions are evaluation, but also supervision. So evaluation is a systematic judgment of evidences by a knowledgeable other for the summative purpose of assigning a rating of quality. It's the rating you get at the end of the year. Supervision is the intentional interaction with knowledgeable others for the formative purpose of improving practice. This is the process along the way where folks are working with the principal, in this case the principal's evaluator or supervisor, along the way making those visits, checking on things, making recommendations to improve practice. So there is a summative function that standards need to deal with, as well as a formative function that these standards need to support. And that was important as we think about the language and how these standards are going to be ultimately written in the recommendations of this committee. Our standards are rooted in some work that goes back to 2007, 2008. There was a report called Making Sense of Leading Schools. In that report, the Wallace Foundation recognized 7 unique leadership domains for school leadership. Our domains in the North Carolina standards are built on those 7 domains. Click that once. So those 7 domains are what make up the North Carolina School Executive Standards in their current form. The next slide. Just click it twice. Our existing standards were aligned with the Interstate Leadership Licensure Consortium standards from 2008. They were a strong guiding influence in the standards that we have. So the question from Pepsi was, are we sure that our current standards align with the national standards and what we now have as priorities in school leadership? So that was the question that led to putting this group of individuals together. So go to that next slide. So with that in mind, we do have new national standards. We have new national standards for principal preparation. They're the NELP standards. And we have new national standards for school leadership. They are now called the PEASL standards, the professional standards for education leaders. So what this committee had to think about was, in what ways are the existing standards for North Carolina school leaders different from the things that are important in the national standards, both for preparation as well as for evaluation of school leaders? And click all the way through. There you go. Nope. Yep. So the other thing we had to consider is the process for evaluating principals in North Carolina is not just the standards themselves. We also, the standards contribute to a process that is a year-long interaction with the principal, their building, their community for the school, as well as their evaluator who supports them in doing that work. And so the key components of a strong evaluation system have three unique parts. You have to have the content, what is the expectation of those principles, the context, which we think of as the process. What do you do as the first part of the process? What are those initial meetings in the beginning of the year? What does the visit and the collecting of data throughout the year look like? How does that culminate in a collection of data that the evaluator makes decisions about to provide an evaluation at the end? And then finally, what are the performance level expectations? And we could call those the cognitive type. So we have to make sure that not only do we think about how our standards, the statements of the standards themselves, are aligned with those new national standards, but also what is the impact on the content, the context, and the cognitive type of the process and the standards as they're rolled out by principals as well as their evaluators. Next slide. In order to do this, it's going to take strong partnerships to make sure that we have the right voices involved in the work, as well as ensuring that not only those voices are involved in the work, but there's a level of ownership and acceptance of any changes ultimately that are recommended. So within that current partnership, we have school leaders involved, principals, assistant principals, we have some superintendent voices there. The Pepsi Commission, you'll notice that the Pepsi's gear has a yellow arrow on it. That is the driver of this work. It's what gives it energy. The department is helping to supervise and facilitate the actual work to ensure that the committee is able to move forward. We have professional organizations involved in the work, as well as the educator preparation programs, colleges and universities connected to the work of getting principals and assistant principals ready to do that work. Our primary role is to design, align, and refine our current system to make sure that it's well aligned to the national standards. So the first thing we had to do was say, how does our system, we know that it's connected to those 7 domains from the Wallace Foundation work, how does it compare to the priorities that do show up in the PEASL and the NELP standards? So what you see on this slide, on the left, that grid is what I call a desk analysis or a desk alignment. Literally, you sit down at a desk and you take the labels and the titles of each of the standards and expectations and you line them up to see what matches. And what we discovered is when we lined up the PEASL and the NELP standards in high-level areas based on the topics of those standards themselves, they aligned very directly to our 7 primary leadership domains, and then 2 additional domains showed up, and those additional domains were equity and ethics. So in addition to doing that just with the actual standards themselves, we brought the committee together at a meeting that we held at RTI, and those are the pictures that you see on the right. On the wall in that room are our standards in statements. They're the posters at the tops of those charts that you see. And then below those are places to collect little stickies. And each of those committees has little sticky notes. And those sticky notes are the individual expectations of the PEASL and the NELP standards. And we literally aligned the individual expectations of the PEASL and the NELP standards to our existing 7 domains. We went into deep granularity at that meeting. So click that one again. So that high-level altitude, click it again, and that deep dive, click it again, they lined up almost exactly. We ended up with 2 posters at the end that said these are ones that don't have any place to fit in our 7 domains, and they fit into 2 categories, ethics and equity. So that was very telling in giving us some information about how we needed to proceed. So then the committee circled back around and said, so what do we need to consider as we think about changes, improvements, and adjustments to our standards for principals in North Carolina? So what we decided was we would consider the content, the context, and the cognitive type. Click it again, all 3 times. There you go. The goal is to make recommendations to the Pepsi Commission where we refine and align the content, work really hard to preserve and improve the context. This is the annual work and the pathway that the principal and that their evaluator are involved in throughout the year. That has become pretty well accepted across the state. We think there are some good patterns in that process work already that we think it is valuable to work to try to maintain and just improve and build upon those. And then finally, to adjust and edit the cognitive type expectations. And that literally is how the rubric moves from left to right and how the expectations increase in their level of expectation and requirements for principals from the left-hand side of the rubric to the right-hand side of the rubric. Any changes to the content will have impacts on how the rubric is articulated for developing proficient, accomplished, and distinguished. Next slide. So as the committee thought about what we might need to refine and align, the things that rose to the top were to maintain high-level standard domains that we have. So the existing 7 standard domains can stay. They're perfectly well aligned to what we have in the new standards for PECL and NILP. But we need to bring forth that ethics and equity standard. So the decision was made to take the ethics standard and actually combine it with micropolitical leadership. The existing micropolitical leadership standard was the thinnest standard with the least amount of additional information in the rubric, so there was room to couple those two together, and they do interact in a way that makes that connection reasonable. And then to add an equity standard. So in the end, the recommendation will likely be that rather than 7 leadership domains, we'll have 8. With the 8th one being the addition of the equity standard. It's interesting because Dr. Prince mentioned this earlier, and that was the importance of looking at how student outcomes change as a result of school leadership. That showed up in this committee's conversation. They want to refine the language of the content to make sure that there is a connection between school leadership and student outcomes. And then finally, to closely align the dispositions and the competencies for successful school leadership with the standards. The disposition and the competency work probably will be a second tier of work because it's really important that we get the rubric and the language in that rubric refined first. So the green part that you see on the slide now is what the committee's working on currently as we work. So the next slide. The goal is to preserve and improve, as I mentioned, these content or this process expectations. So as we maintain our existing 7-step process, and there's a little graphic of that on the left of this slide, for that annual evaluation process for the principal, assistant principal, and their evaluator, we also want to provide clear guidance and support for resources for school leaders and their evaluator. We have lots of existing resources out there that will still be perfectly relevant. But as we add equity and ethics, we are going to need to expand that set of resources to include those 2 areas because they are new, and offer meaningful examples of appropriate artifacts, documentation, timelines, anything we can do to help the principal and the evaluator think about those things specifically in supporting shared leadership and then again to address student outcomes. Click this one more time. We recognize that when this committee is finished making those recommendations, part of what we need to do is get some specific input from human resources professionals in districts across the state. There may be impacts in these standards and the expectations that we need that human resources perspective to consider how they play out. Next slide. As we think about the rubric, we're going to need to make adjustments and edits so that the expectations of the rubric provide strong formative guidance for the actions of school leaders. So rather than the rubric just being the thing at the end that the principal brings in and evaluates, how does the rubric at the very beginning of the year help the principal and assistant principal to build out their plan for improvement, for work, for priorities at the very beginning of the year? Ensuring that there's a clear alignment of the descriptors to the expectations of the standards and the elements as those are articulated, and then use language again that addresses student outcomes, and then finally offer meaningful examples of appropriate artifacts as we move from left to right in the rubric. Part of the goal here is to find language that supports the process that involves feedback, input, comments, review, and success, but that process throughout the year falls into those two distinct areas, you have to click it twice, of supervision and evaluation. Supervision has pieces that are unique to supervision, evaluation has pieces that are unique to evaluation, and there's this huge part in the middle that overlaps. Next slide. Research reveals that alignment is a stronger predictor of student achievement on standardized tests than are socioeconomic status, gender, race, or teacher effect. Alignment is a pretty big deal when we talk about standards for how we measure outcomes for students. But as we think about that, next slide. In other words, when formative supports and the summative assessments align with the expectations, students should be more successful. So it stands to reason that when both the supervision behaviors and the evaluation measures align with the standards, educators should be more successful. So this notion of alignment is what this committee is really trying to make sure we keep at the base of all of the work that we're doing as we think about how these standards need to be written to maintain the high priorities that we have in our existing standards and bring forth those things that have shown up in the new national standards, specifically in ethics and equity. Next slide. So one of the ways that we did this was to think about how we might support change in a way that has nothing to do with education in schools. So the example that we used was, how might you support change to assist someone in getting six-pack abs? And the committee actually came together and was involved in a little activity to do this. And they had to come up with strategies they could use to get six-pack abs, targets or milestones that might be helpful to track along the way, and how they could get their friends and family to help them. So within those strategies, you see that to get six-pack abs, you could develop and maintain a schedule to work out regularly, do exercises that focus on that abdominal core, and reduce your calorie intake. As you think about how to see how you're doing along the way, you could develop a workout frequency so that you go to the gym at least 3 times a week. A workout duration, you're going to stay at the gym at least 30 minutes. Abdominal target exercises, so you want to target that specific area you're working on for those six-pack abs. Check your weight 3 times per week to see if you're maintaining or reducing your weight, and then do a mirror check to see whether anything resembling six-pack abs is beginning to show up. And then how could you get your friends and family to help you? You could get them to ask how you're doing and to check in consistently, to pick or agree to healthy restaurants if you go out to eat, and finally invite them to join you at the gym. So as we think about those 3 ways that we could address getting six-pack abs, one of the important reasons that we did this was to look at how these structures are helpful to support change. This next sequence, Kim, just click through these kind of one at a time. So you see that getting six-pack abs are summative measures. Click it again. But formative measures are what you would do to track your progress along the way. Click it again. The strategies and actions for doing that are the things that we listed at the top. And then the formative support, how do you help someone who is trying to make these changes? That's what's at the bottom. So the outcome is to get six-pack abs. But the outputs are those strategies, actions, and measures for doing so. This idea of outcomes and outcomes is really critical as we think about designing standards that are going to be helpful both to principals to design their work and their supervisors or evaluators to support them and evaluate it at the end. Next slide. So what you see here is a framework or a lens that we can look at the standards as we think about designing these elements. And this is the shape of the new design for how elements will be articulated. So what you see here is there's a domain area, an outcome goal, and an essential output. So in the area of health and fitness, to get six-pack abs, the principal or assistant principal will develop and maintain a schedule to work out at least 3 times a week, doing exercises that focus on the abdominal core and reduce the total number of calories consumed each day. So the principal at the end of the year is coming, or the principal's evaluator at the end of the year is coming to look for six-pack abs. But when they come at the beginning of the year and the middle of the year and near the end of the year to ask that principal how they're doing, how are things progressing, what they're going to be working to support there is, has the principal developed and maintained that schedule to work out at least 3 times a week, to do those exercises, to focus on that abdominal core? So are those actions and things to lead to the outcome goal, are they easy to identify, so the principal can move forward and their evaluator can look and support them in doing that. So what does that look like in real practice in real schools? In the next slide, we have an example of the recommendation for 1B. The area for 1B is leading change. The outcome goal is to develop a culture of collaboration, inquiry, problem solving, and successful innovation and change. And in order to do that, the principal or assistant principal will establish high expectations for teachers and students, identify barriers to success, and disrupt the status quo to lead systematic change efforts to make the school's structures, systems, and processes more collaborative and productive for students and staff. So the idea here is the principal's evaluator can be clear about what they're looking for at the end, but as the principal thinks about their work at the very beginning of the year, when they make that plan for the year, they have to consider how they're going to establish those high expectations, how they're going to identify barriers to success along the way to make those necessary improvements. And both levels, the evaluation and the supervision, are supported by the way these standards will be articulated. What you see on this next slide is an example of the goal to be more precise and action-oriented in the language. In the existing language at the top, you'll see that school mission, vision, and strategic goals, the statement there is that the school's identity, in part, is derived from the vision, mission, values, beliefs, and goals of the school, and then processes used to establish those attributes and the ways that they are embedded in the life of the school community. While that's a fact, and it's true of school leadership, it doesn't do very much guiding or directing of the principal or their evaluator as you think about that work. What that looks like in the new structure is for school vision, mission, and strategic goals to establish an educational mission that fosters a vision of successful learning and development. The principal and assistant principal will collaborate with members of the school and the community to use relevant data to create and promote a shared vision for successful learning and development of each child, supported by instructional and organizational values, goals, strategies, and practices that promote and advance the academic success and well-being of each child. So you see, while the language is a little thicker, the paragraph is a little larger, it's much more clear what the actual actions of the school leader are in moving towards the school vision, mission, and strategic goals. Once all of the individual elements' language are identified, then the next task is to think about how the rubric articulates expectations from left to right. And the rubric will have a common framework that remains consistent for each of the elements, and that framework will be, as you think about developing, proficient, accomplished, and distinguished, those labels remain the same, but the developing column will always measure things that are looking for the principal's understanding. Click it once. Yeah, the principal's understanding of the work. Go ahead and click it all the way through. The second one, the proficient column, is looking for application. The accomplished column is looking for impact. So as a result of this principal's knowledge and what they did, are things changing? And then finally, the ability to systematize. That highest level, a distinguished principal, is systematizing their practices. You might think of that as, if the principal disappeared tomorrow, would the great things they have happening continue to coast on autopilot for a while before anybody noticed they were missing? That's the kind of work we want a distinguished principal doing. Next slide. And then finally, the idea is, once the rubric is built out with those consistent structures from left to right, the principal's evaluator needs to make a decision about their rating overall. And the way that they do that, just click all the way through till the arrows go away. There you go. Go back one now. Excellent. So the way that they do that is think about how the principal did in the work that they did for each standard overall. So in the area of instructional leadership, did the principal possess knowledge of appropriate practices? If that's all the evaluator can say, that principal is developing. If in addition to having that knowledge, the evaluator can say they used those practices in ways that frequently created positive conditions for success, they can confidently say that principal is at least proficient. If in addition to that, they can say that they used those practices in ways that consistently resulted in desired outcomes, then they can confidently say that principal is accomplished. And then finally, if in addition to those three characteristics, they can also say that they developed or redesigned systems for leading people, processes, to collectively construct and achieve measurable desired outcomes. If all four of those statements can come together and the evaluator is confident those things are in place, they can confidently say that this principal is distinguished in that particular area. Next slide. This is the implementation planning timeline that we have so far. Fall and winter, which is kind of where we are now, we've been developing and thinking about the language of those elements, and we are working on structuring the rubric. Spring says report to the Pepsi Commission and the State Board. Well, here we are to report to the Pepsi Commission. And in the summer, the goal this summer will be to assess this proposed rubric specifically against the personnel evaluation standards for evaluating educators. There actually is a recommended set of priorities that evaluation instruments for principals should have. So we want to check these against those. In the 2021 school year, we really want to engage some critical stakeholders in the field to get feedback on these standards. That specifically needs to include superintendents, human resources folks, school administrators, and then principal prep, the universities. We will bring that information back to Pepsi in the spring, and in the summer continue updates, and we want to recruit pilot districts who might use the new standards with the idea that in the 2021-2022 school year, this rubric could be offered as an option for pilot districts. We could collect information from those pilot districts about how the standards look in actual use and application. And then in the summer of 2022, present these back to the Pepsi Commission, the results of the pilot, and then seek guidance in final implementation. How do we want to do it? Do we want a rollout? Do we need more pilot data collection? What does that need to look like? So that's the timeline for where we think we probably need to go with these. The actual work of development of the rubric is currently underway, and the individual language for the individual descriptors is what's currently being developed right now. So next slide, I'll just say what else should we consider and what questions can I answer for folks? If anybody has specific questions, my email address is there on the slide, and I certainly would invite and welcome any. If you weren't able to see that, get in touch with Kim. She can connect you with me.
Thank you, Dr. Sox.
Can you hear me? This is Tabari.
Yes, go ahead, Tabari.
Okay, I just wanted to say, in your next phase, can you make sure that the descriptors that you just mentioned, can you make sure to include actual artifacts? A lot of superintendents are going that route, whereas they're not in schools all the time, so if you cannot prove what you're doing, you cannot progress to the right of the rubric. So principals kind of need to run all over the place of what an artifact looks like with the current system. And we make sure that we have the guidance from on high, so it's not left up to superintendent interpretation in regards to our progression to the right.
Sure, absolutely. I think what you're describing is exactly what the committee is aware of, especially in areas where there might be changes or adjustments, understanding what strong artifacts for those will be. The other thing that I'm hopeful about, though, is that the actual adjustment and improvement in language will make what those artifacts should be much more logical and obvious.
Okay, all right. Okay, I appreciate it, and I welcome any, please pick up the phone anytime if you get to a stuck point. I would love to give feedback in the development of this group.
Sure. Be careful what you volunteer to do. Thank you.
Hey, trust me, it's my future and how I'm evaluated. I'm definitely available. Just let me know.
All right. Next, we'd like to call on Dr. Tom Tomberlin to come up and provide his updates, and he will also discuss response rates for recent graduate and employer surveys as part of the EPP accountability model. Dr. Tomberlin.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. Greetings to all of our commission members on the phone. Just wanted to give you a brief update on the annual report of the state of the teaching profession. This report will be delivered to the General Assembly this week. The changes that have been made from the last time we discussed this, the board asked for some updates on equity in relation to our recruitment and retention of teachers. So here we have the breakdown, the percentage of our student population versus the demographic percentages of our teaching population, just to give us an idea of how well our teaching force reflects the student population it serves. And you can see there that the big group that jumps out is Hispanic Latinx population, where the student population is roughly 7 times that of the teaching population. African Americans are a little less than 2-to-1 student to teacher ratio. And so the board asked that we keep report this in future presentations to see how well we're achieving the diversification of the teaching force. And then the other thing was a chart here that you see. This is looking at the attrition rate by demographic subgroup. The horizontal black line represents the state average. And so we've constructed point estimates of the attrition rate for each of the subgroups, along with a confidence interval around that. So where that confidence interval, and the confidence interval is that bar that's stretching out from the point. If it crosses that state average, then our inference is that there is not a disproportional attrition rate for that subgroup. But however, if you look at American Indian, Alaska Native subgroup, that's the second subgroup, their attrition rate is well below the line and the confidence interval doesn't touch. So our inference there is that the Native American teaching population is not leaving, or is leaving the profession at lower rates than average. And then you see the Asian and the Hispanic population, both of their confidence intervals are above the average line, so we would, which suggests that those groups are leaving the state at disproportional rates. Now, if you think about the issue with this, if the inputs into the system, particularly around Hispanic teaching population, if the incoming group is less than, or if we're not doing a good job of recruiting, and we're losing them at higher rates, that creates a problem for us in creating that representation in our teaching force. So that is the update that is going to the JLEOC and the General Assembly this week. The other thing that is going to the JLEOC is the proposed model for measuring teachers' effectiveness for teachers who administer North Carolina final exams. As you know, with 621, North Carolina final exams are being eliminated and for the 2021 school year. And as part of that elimination, the board must make a recommendation for how to measure effectiveness for those teachers who no longer have those tests. And so the proposed model, I want to skip to slide 4. The NCFE context, just so everybody's aware, we have about 17,000 teachers. Is that not in yours? Go back. Yeah, we have about 17,000 teachers who receive some information from NCFE, some growth information, but 12,000 receive that growth information exclusively from the North Carolina final exams. And below, the second bullet point shows you the subjects and grades that are covered by the NCFEs. This does not include elementary. We went ahead and eliminated the elementary North Carolina final exams previously. So this is just the middle school and the high school courses. The proposed model that the state board is recommending is that teachers, and this is broader than just North Carolina final exam. This is the best way to measure teacher effectiveness, and this is based on research that North Carolina has been involved in, the Measures of Effective Teaching study and other studies of how to adequately measure teacher effectiveness, is to adopt a multiple measure approach. And from that perspective, the proposal is that teachers be measured on professional practice, that is standards 1 and 5 of our evaluation system. And the recommendation is that principals would be responsible for observing and evaluating that behavior. And then we have instructional practice, and that could be, that domain could be measured through would be measured through classroom practice as observed on standards 2, 3, and 4. And the recommendation there is that a teacher or an advanced teacher or recognized expert matched on content give that feedback on effectiveness, and then to incorporate student perceptions of the instructional environment and the instructional practice of the teacher. And then finally, any system that we develop would need some measure of student growth. That could be achieved historically as we've done through EVOS. There are some recommendations for other types of assessments that could be used. If the type of assessment for the North Carolina final exams was at issue, then we could recommend other ways to assess the student learning in those areas, or the state could switch to a more performance-based assessment system, but some kind of measure of student growth is necessary. The board's recommendation to the state board, to the General Assembly, is that until such time as this type of model could be implemented, and we do want to recognize that this type of model would require many years of development and implementation, that until such time as that is achieved, that teachers who teach these core courses in middle school and high school need some measure of effectiveness to understand how well they're preparing our students for college and career. And until we can adopt this model, some form of statewide assessment needs to be in play until we can switch to this more robust model. So that's the recommendation that's going forward. If any of you are interested in the full recommendation, that should be publicly available sometime this week. If any of you, I'm not sure where that's going to be posted before it's sent over to the General Assembly, but certainly you can contact me if you would like to see the full report that's going forward. I will pause for any questions or comments.
Questions?
This is Mariah Morris, and I have a comment.
Sure.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm doing well.
I appreciate you looking at teacher evaluation from a comprehensive standpoint where we're looking at multiple measures of the teacher effectiveness. And I just want to reiterate some comments that I made at the state board meeting. Again, when we're looking at the instructional practices and how to measure teachers' instructional success with those standards. And I just want to reiterate that I strongly think that this should be measured by either a principal or an assistant principal, but not by other teachers in the building. When we move evaluations to master teachers, we are changing the relationship of the teachers in the building, and we're adding in a degree of competitiveness and evaluative measures when it's put on a master teacher. And I think that's going to be anti-collaborative in a time when we're really pushing professional learning communities and a collaboration mindset amongst teachers. Teachers are going to be less willing to have that collaborative mindset when they're being evaluated by other teachers. Secondly, if it's being done by a master teacher or instructional coach, I think that teachers, especially beginning teachers, are going to be less likely to seek help and assistance from their coaches or master teachers. It's going to take away some of the ability to have a judgment-free zone, and I'm afraid that that's really going to damage that relationship that can be so productive. And then lastly, I think it's going to take a lot of instructional time for the day if we're putting that on teachers. Master teachers are already strapped with leading interventions, leading professional learning communities, taking on leadership roles, and I'm afraid that putting these evaluations on them is going to eat up a lot of their time.
Great. Thank you for those comments. I do want to point out one distinction. We are talking about measuring effectiveness, not evaluation. So we're using those elements that are captured in the evaluation process, but really this is something slightly different and about determining whether a teacher is in need of improvement, effective, or highly effective, which may not be exactly the same as the formal evaluation process.
Tom, this is Glenda, and I would echo the concerns of Mariah there with regards to, personnel file data and measuring teacher effect using the evaluation instrument. And if we're using the evaluation instrument, I may be misunderstanding here as well, but if we're using that for master teachers, it's almost like we're adding back in the standard 6. I know that's not on there, but if that's what it appears that we're doing. I have the same exact concerns that Mariah has, because right now we have this relationship with peer observations where it's not evaluative, right? It's getting good critical feedback. And then we also suffer with finding great mentor teachers that can mentor our beginning teachers. And now we start, some of those folks are master teachers as well, and there's just not enough teachers to go around and pull them to measure effectiveness for a teacher, which really does tie right back to the evaluation instrument and right back to the personnel file. Just my comment.
Sure.
Other questions or comments? All right, Dr. Tomlin.
Great. The last issue that I want to raise, and I don't have a presentation for this, but I just need to recognize a concern we have for our EPPs in the accountability model. We've recently looked at the data related to the recent hire and the employer survey, which are both proposed elements in the accountability model for EPPs. And when we look at those data, and I'm going to refer to Dr. Seiberg here for a second. What are the response rates what were the respective response rates that we're dealing with?
On the survey.
On the recent graduate and the
25 to 30%.
So we're looking at response rates in the low 20s, or the high 20s, low 30%. And the concern is, and I think most of the IHE folks on the call will echo the concern of creating a generalized assessment of an EPP based on such low response rates. And so at this point, I'm simply putting the commission on alert that it is probably in our best interest to think about recommending policy to the State Board of Education to ensure that those response rates of our newly employed teachers and our partnering employers has to be much higher than this. And what are the incentives and/or we'll just say incentives for creating better response rates that can be that will be valid and reliable for a accountability model. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments on that.
Any other questions?
Tom, do you have examples of what incentives might be? This is Ann.
I don't off the top of my head. I think my mind immediately turns to kind of punitive measures, which I certainly don't want to think about, but I don't know that we don't have money to support this kind of endeavor, or I don't know what those incentives would look like. All I know is it's going to be very problematic for us to be reporting on the quality of, and I'll just throw out North Carolina State as an example, if we're only getting a 25% response rate from the student population and the employers who are supervising those newly hired teachers.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. All right, now we will hear from Ms. Lee O'Neill, the Regional Coordinator for the Southeast Region for Career and Technical Education. She will provide us some revisions to CTED-004, Career and Technical Education Licensure Policies and Procedures Manual for us to consider. Ms. O'Neill?
Good morning, everybody. Kim, are you pulling up the slide deck?
Yes, hold on. So what I have are PDFs. Is that what you want me to bring up?
I think you the slide deck. Do you want me to share my screen? I can go through the summary of changes without a slide deck if, that's what I took the slides from, so it's whatever you guys prefer.
I can make you the presenter right now. You like that?
Give me 1 second to pull up the slides. Sorry, everybody, just a second. Okay, just, asking you about the share my screen. Can you see it?
We don't see the slide deck.
Okay, all right, 1 second. I must have missed something. Ready? Good morning, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I am Leah Neal, the Southeast CTE Regional Coordinator, and this morning I'm requesting your support for revisions to State Board Policy CTED 004. Input on these revisions is collected all year long from DPI licensure staff, RAUC staff, local CTE directors, local HR directors and licensure staff, and CTE state staff. Oops, hang on a second. Okay, gotta learn how to operate in this environment. Okay. As a reminder, this policy is the CTE licensing policy and procedures manual. It covers initial CTE restricted licensing, adding CTE areas to existing licenses, and licensing in CTE support services areas. CTE teachers that have bachelor's degrees may also choose residency licensing, which is defined in LICN 001. One of the issues we encounter when we improve policy is that teachers who began their initial license or added an area provisionally under old policy cannot take advantage of the newer requirements. We would like to put in an option in this policy that would allow the newest policy to be used for any teacher in their initial license period or who is adding an area provisionally. North Carolina CTE recognizes the difficulty in recruiting and retaining CTE teachers, and Perkins 5, our new federal legislation, requires us to address our state efforts in this area. Quite often, candidates from business and industry already have degrees and are earning salaries that are much higher than we can offer. They may not want to add another degree and do not want to incur the expense associated with getting a teaching license. I think that one of the ways we can entice professionals from business and industry to enter the teaching profession in CTE is to provide them with a cohort pedagogy curriculum delivery model that's designed specifically for CTE teachers. We've investigated models in other states and are confident that we can provide this for our new teachers at no cost or at the most a very minimal cost. As you can see from the timeline on the right side of the slide, we will plan and begin training this. We will plan and begin training this coming school year, and would actually begin the first cohort of teachers until 21-22. Requires planning and training so that we're ready to enroll in fall of 21-22. Remember, this would apply only to teachers who have CTE restricted licenses, where they can only add areas inside CTE. If adding academic areas, they would need to pursue a residency license or enroll in a teacher education program. Our plan would be that next spring we would bring details of this cohort program to you for your approval prior to enrolling new teachers. Even with the cohort option, we'll maintain the option of taking community college or university level coursework. Some of our teachers will continue to want this option as they pursue associate, bachelor's, and master's degrees. We would like for all our CTE teachers to have the same 18 hours of pedagogy to provide a level of consistency and decrease confusion to new teachers. In the current policy, almost every license has a different course requirement. Just agriculture education would have an additional 3 hours given the nature of their content. They will need an additional course in supervising student agriculture experiences. This is proposed required hours here adding digital teaching and learning. We'd also like to ease the financial burden and reduce duplication by allowing a year of successful teaching or continuing ed credits to substitute for classroom management semester hours. We also recommend CEU counting in lieu of coursework for the digital teaching and learning requirement. We know that most districts are providing professional development on both of these topics, either in their beginning teacher support program or just in their general professional development they're providing to all their teachers. This will help our new teachers by reducing the cost of coursework and giving them an opportunity to cash in some CEU that they're actually earning during their initial license period. As CEU is always evolving to keep up with employment trends in business and industry, we would like to add a new license area for our local courses. These courses were developed by the local district in response to local and regional needs and go through a rigorous approval process within North Carolina CTE. The courses help the field drive innovation and meet local and regional employment needs. Because many times our license areas do not fit the content of a local course, we're proposing a local course license. One example is those. Currently, those teachers are getting licensed in construction. However, the construction credentials are not aligned to national marine trade credentials in boat building and manufacturing. Having an option for a local course license would give the district more flexibility in hiring and ensure the licensing is more aligned to the course content. The degree and work experience alignment will be determined by the local district with approval from the regional coordinator. The requirements will be the same as all other CTE licenses. The local course license will be limited to teaching only those approved local courses. The teachers could add other areas down the line since they have or would have the same pedagogy as any other CTE teacher. Perkins 5 also has a strong emphasis in career development. We currently have a licensing option for current educators to become career development coordinators, but we don't have a way to recruit straight from business and industry. We'd like to provide a licensed position for candidates from business and industry who are not classroom teachers or guidance counselors. They would do the same work as our career development coordinators and would be required to fulfill the same licensure requirements. They would not be able to add other areas because they would not be taking the required pedagogy that our licensed teachers take. Their strength is in their networking and direct experience supporting work-based learning in business and industry. We're requesting a few minor updates to our support service license areas. In the CTE director's license, we continue to encounter difficulty finding the one required course at the university level. We do have the university partners willing to offer the course in the continuing education division and will issue a professional certificate. The content and hours will be the same as the university course, but the cost to the participant will be decreased. The career coordinator and special populations coordinator license options were confusing. So we just rearranged the wording there, clarified the options to make it easier to understand. We also split the CDC and SBC inductions and removed the career development course as an option for fulfilling requirements for the special populations license. We have a dedicated course for that license that was approved last year. For curriculum instructional management coordinators, we're finding that some assistant principals are interested in this position. If they're not licensed in the CTE area, they have difficulty adding this on. So we're adding the school administrator license and experience as a school administrator as criteria to assist in and obtain this area if they accept one of these positions. Lastly, academic competency. Licenses, candidates with a high school diploma and a significant amount of work experience can be hired and initially licensed. They must prove academic competence. The current policy allows a lot of options and the combining of scores to prove academic competence. The RALC is requesting that we limit the options and require all scores from one test. We're recommending the ACT and ACT work keys as all juniors in North Carolina take the ACT and all CTE concentrators take the ACT work keys. We're also recommending the North Carolina Community College Placement Test, ACT, also called NCDAP, as they will need that if they choose to take courses at the community college. This concludes our recommended revisions for this policy for next year. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, are there any questions from Ms. O'Neill?
This is Mariah Morris. I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, can you go back to the last content slide that you had? I believe it was 8 about the high school graduate. Can you explain situations that led you guys to think that the best choice was eliminating a college degree to license a CTE teacher?
Way back, I think historically, and those of you in the room that have been in the field as long or longer than me, jump in. I don't know specifically. What I do know is that in trade and industrial, especially, you have folks who graduate high school that then go on to be certified as a welder, for example. So they have many years of experience in business and industry, serving as a licensed welder, and it requires 6 years, I'm pretty sure, if it's a high school diploma candidate.
I thought it was
That's right. It's only in the trade and industrial areas that we allow high school diploma, and they do have to have the associated industry credential that goes with that employment sector as well. Automotive's another example. It would be very difficult, and it is very difficult for us to draw bachelor degree candidates in those trade and industrial areas. We do get some. We've even had someone become a teacher with a master's in automotive engineering. So we had some issues working out their pay because the master's degree didn't quite align to the automotive. But they are paid lower on the pay scale, also in the policy, and you have a copy of the strike-through version and a draft version. It's toward the end, the second appendix, probably the last page or second to last page. Teachers with a high school diploma are paid 4 years down on the pay scale. Teachers with an associate's degree, which is also in trade and industrial, but we have a handful of associate degrees in other areas as well. They're paid 2 years down on the pay scale. It's held in escrow. If they go on to get their degree, their pay can be moved up to bachelor's degree or associate degree level.
This is Glenda. Mariah, school districts would be crippled if we didn't have this as part of our licensure and employment opportunities, just because of the specialized skill sets that they bring to the table that they can't necessarily get through a traditional program. But I want to just say that thank you to the changes that are being made in there. I think these are all going to be received very well in the field.
Glenda, can I take that as a motion?
You can take that as a motion.
All right. We have a motion to approve the revisions to CTED-004 to be sent to the state board in April. Do we have a second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the revisions to CTED-004. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And that has been approved. Thank you, Ms. O'Neill.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Who made the second? Was that Dr. Fleming or Dr. Wood?
Me, Wetwood.
Yes, thank you.
All right, now Mr. Carl Logan, the Director for Driver Education, and Dr. Reggie Flythe, Consultant for Driver Ed, will provide an update on the NCDPI Safety and Traffic Education Program, otherwise known as STEP.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to provide an update on the STEP program. To reiterate my statements from last year, we feel that the DPI driver education section is in the process of developing a traffic safety program which will push and reset the bar for our nation's industry. To do that, we need effective and well-trained teachers disseminating the most current information pertaining to traffic safety technology and developments. Today, our team of experts in driver education curriculum and program development have followed through on the plan to develop and implement the Safety and Traffic Education Program. First, we'll have Tanya Easterwood, our project manager, who will provide a high-level overview of development and the implementation timelines. And then we'll have Reggie Flythe, who will provide a deeper dive into the program progress in which we have made. Then we'll be available for follow-up.
Okay.
Ms. Easterwood?
Morning.
Morning.
So, of course, we've been extremely busy on the cohort. We're very excited about everything that we've been doing. So my basis this morning is to go back to a timeline that we shared when we previously presented our program. And there are 3 areas that are currently highlighted in red. So those areas are things that we did not do, and I'm going to mention what those adjustments were and why. So in summer 2019, we were saying that the licensure pathway would be offered, or that would be at when our cohort started. In actuality, we pushed that back to fall. We actually began September 2019, and that was also because we were still a limited team. So it was getting a lot of work done at the same time. However, we did go there, but we were a few months off. And then also by the time it was available, it was the beginning of the school year, which would not have been feasible for that program to begin at that time for our teachers, because that's a busy time of the year. So as you go down to spring 2020, we said that originally we would offer 1 session in the summer, 2 sessions in the fall, and 2 sessions in the spring. That is not feasible at this time, and this is why. So we will not be offering a summer course this summer in 2020. However, we are brainstorming how we can offer a hybrid course during the summer months of 2021. So many people are familiar with the Quality Matters standard, but we used OSCAR, which is Open Sunny Code Quality Review, and it's a free course that's equivalent to Quality Matters, so we can go through the content to make sure that our course is presenting the information as best as possible for our students. And then we also make sure that we revise the course to align with Universal Design Language, which is UDL. These are very critical components whenever you're teaching online and making sure that our messages are going across. So the summer session, when we say we are brainstorming a hybrid course, what we want to do is not minimize the content of the course. However, offer them prerequisites to the course so that the hybrid portion of that could be specific driver education information. Also, we said we will be offering 2 sessions in both the fall and spring. That was changed. We brought on Dr. Amelia Royster Davis, which her background is instructional design. She took a review of the course using that OSCA data review, and there were several things missing. And she also identified we had too much information for the students to have the ability to consume and complete the assignments. So based on her feedback and the rubric, we adjusted our course. So we said that we would have 3 courses in our STEP program. However, it is now 5. But what that means is the content didn't change. We reduced the amount into bite-sized chunks so that we can make sure that the students were set up for success. So we now offer the teaching. We have orientation, because of course we got to teach our team, the teachers, how to use the online component, which is Canvas. How are we going to do that, and also use the collaboration tools that we're leveraging that have been here in the building. So we have webinars in the afternoon, and Mr. Flife will speak to that a little later. So in addition to that, we do teacher, classroom, behind the wheel, and DMV. Our 3 courses originally combined the national standards information that we had acquired from ANSTI and the DMV content to align North Carolina information inside of the course. However, the DMV content was extensive, so now what we have done is pull that DMV content out and allow that to be a standalone model. So now we have an orientation to teach them how to utilize the course, and then we have the DMV content that will be separate from the driver education, because we feel like it's critical for them to know what the laws are and how it is applied here in North Carolina as they prepare to go in to teach the students. So, and that actually came back from some feedback that we had during the cohort, because we did do surveys to obtain feedback from the students so that we can see how are things going, what do we need to tweak, and how do we need to move forward. And a lot of them did say that it was a lot of work to be done, which we want it to be a lot of work, but we want it to also be processed in a manner in which they can consume it and it will be able to be feasible with their day. We streamlined the course so that it would also be a 16-week course. So we did it a semester long. That way they have a week to complete each assignment based on the modules that we have, and then it will also align with them having a week break to transition into the other courses. For this, we felt that it was the best way for us to make sure everyone stayed together as they complete the program, but also have enough time if in that week someone is behind on any type of assignments, we're able to assist. We're able to make sure that we are providing adequate support. So those are the things that we have done. So those revisions that we have made, we feel are in the best interest at this time for the program, so that we can make sure not only that the program is successful and properly aligns with online blended learning, that also our students are set up for success. We are a limited team, so we do have 2 contractors that are assisting. So those are the other reasons why, in addition to only offering 1 session in the fall and 1 session in the spring versus the 2, is because we don't have enough teachers. The interaction online, we feel, is requiring more than we initially thought. And which is a good thing, because they're embracing the tools, they're embracing the technology. So we want to make sure we build that in. We want to make sure that they feel like even though they are online, they still have the presence of a teacher and in that classroom feel. And so far, the changes that we made that were recommended from the cohort, the pilot, the students are embracing those changes and they are excited about the course. They have said it is a lot of content. However, when you're teaching traffic safety, we can't compromise that, because they're teaching the students one of the most critical things that they'll be doing for the rest of their lives. And traffic safety for our students is really critical in our state. Also, the other reason why we are limited with our resources, we're also designing the online course for the student curriculum so that we can take that blended course. We can also make that a blended course in the fall, so we'll be piloting that in the fall. So that also contributed to one of the barriers as to why we had to minimize the offerings, but we did not minimize the content at all.
Good morning. My name is Reggie Flythe. I am the master teacher for the course. Just want to briefly talk about the pilot. In the pilot program, the people who participated in that were current teachers. They already certified teachers, either DMV or have 096 on their license. We had a 70% completion rate in that. We had a few that wanted to go through the program, and then for whatever reason, they decided not to complete the course. And as Tanya said, we completed the course review. We got a lot of good feedback from the pilot, and we used Oscar to work on the improvements for the first cohort. All right, on this spring cohort, we started that back in February. Right now, we have an 85% participation rate from the beginning. This course includes 12 new teachers and 8 mentor candidates. Each new teacher has a mentor assigned to them. So as they get into the teaching and learning phase and the classroom and behind the wheel phase, there are some opportunities for them to go into the classrooms to observe those mentors teaching the course and satisfying the requirement of our course. In April of this year, we have planned face-to-face meetings with all our mentors, those who participated in the pilot project and those who are currently going through the course. We wanted to join the North Carolina Driving and Traffic Safety Educational Association conference. And at that time, we wanted to provide concurrent sessions to provide hands-on training in both classroom and behind the wheel best practices. So we will also provide training in classroom and behind the wheel assessment, documentation, and data collection required during the student teaching practicum. Next slide. We also, in the fall, plan to have face-to-face time with mentors and new teachers. We will follow up on the data collection for the new teachers seeking licensure, collect data on positives and negatives of the STEP program processes, and evaluate the overall effectiveness of the program and the student teaching practicum. This summer, we should have our first candidates go through that student teaching phase, and we're excited about that prospect. So finally, in the fall, we want to use the data and feedback that we capture to make future program updates. So the key takeaways, the LEAs are engaged in providing mentor candidates for us, and they have agreed to provide support for student teaching practicum experiences. And the LEAs with a need for new teachers are providing mentor candidates and have identified new teachers to go through the STEP program. We are really excited. We have one LEA in particular who found out what we were doing, and their coordinator of driver licensing is going through the mentorship right now, and he has 3 brand new teaching candidates. So the program is doing what it was designed to do, to provide an alternative method for licensure for our LEAs. And so at this point, if you have any questions, please let us know.
Any questions?
We're gonna take like 1 minute to shift over to the DPI Canvas instance, just to show you inside the course of what that looks like and what some of those changes are. This has been very, very exciting for us. with having such a small team and seeing a baby that you talked about now become, life is awesome. What I'm actually going to show you here, it will be the driving task course for driver ed. This is the one that they're currently enrolled in. Oh, they'll be enrolled in this next. They're in the DMV course currently. So if you notice, we mentioned the UDL, and we also mentioned the Oscar, which is equivalent to Quality Matters, as we did a course review. So our course originally was missing various items. So now, as you can tell, we actually have it laid out a lot easier for the students and for the teachers to realize where do they need to go, how does things look, how do they find anything, and if they go inside of the syllabus, it's going to actually tell them everything, who they need to contact, any additional information. So we use a lot of the concordance and different flip charts, things that will keep them engaged. We also did videos that was personal from Reggie and Mr. Logan. So we felt like those added components and pieces would assist us with keeping them engaged throughout the course, but not only that, allowing them to see how important the course is and then how much we're putting inside the course. Canvas does not currently look like this. We actually found a tool that best aligns with the UDL, and it makes our course flow a little differently than the standard course, and all of the students love it. And then some of the previous teachers said this was a better format and an easier flow for them to know where to go and when to go. So this is kind of what all of our courses look like currently. They all are branded the same, and so they'll know exactly where to go and everything.
So, and finally, the new generation of teachers that are going through this STEP program will see a glimpse of what our new student curriculum will look like. Available for follow-up.
Okay. Sure. Anybody have any questions? Thank you. All right, Dr. Seiberg. He is going to provide a preview of the EPP dashboard for discussion.
Yes, thank you. It's going to take a minute for us to get the dashboard up for folks to see, but I just thought I'd take a real high-level pass at how this overarching online system is going to work, so you can see what how it's going to be used, the versatility of the system, and the different levels of data we're going to be able to provide. I just think it's time for us to share that with you. We shared this information with the board as well. To this point, we've cleansed data of identifiers. So instead of saying like NC State, we might say a tree name. So we've replaced educator preparation program names with tree names, again because we're not quite ready to make sure that everything is out there for public consumption. We're working on validating all the data and going through the systems and stakeholder inputs and all those things going forward. So hopefully now you can see we've been able to pull up the dashboard. And again, I'm not going to get into super detail here, but I just want to draw your attention to the kind of things that we're thinking about going forward. So if you can follow the cursor, Dr. Baxter is going to be sort of working behind the scenes with me as I'm walking you through a couple of things here. And again, we're going to make sure that you all have access to this as, think of this as essentially two different systems for consumption. One would be a behind-the-scenes consumption where we would seek input from you all as stakeholders as well as stakeholders from the field to share thoughts on how we're describing data going forward. That's not for public consumption. And then we would tweak based on the feedback that we're hearing. And then we would have a public side, which is the point at which it becomes public and everybody can see it going forward. So What you see right now is essentially the online dashboard as a whole. And you'll see across the left side of the screen, you'll see a variety of clickable items over there. And if you're up to speed with 107, Senate Bill 107, you'll see that all of those data essentially relate directly to a variety of measures that are required in the reporting component for EPPs. Now, right now, the only thing that we're trying to stand up this first go-around would be EPP accountability measures. Again, that's just where we started, but you should all be aware that all of the rest that you see along the left are in some stage of development, and they're not in the stage of 5 to 10% completed. They're well along the way. I would say some of them are, literally just a couple of weeks past our initial foray to the point at which that they could be made public as well. So a lot of this information is going to be up to speed very shortly. Our hope here is that ultimately this dashboard system will ultimately replace the report card static documents that I've done since I got here a couple years back. Now, along the top, you'll see a variety of effectively pages of information, and they correspond with whatever it is that's been selected on that left vertical column. So in this case, we've chosen, again, Educator EPP accountability measures, and we're starting at all points. We'll start with the overview, and the overview, when you click on that, it will pull up the center portion of the screen's information, and in there you'll see a bunch of descriptors. Effectively, this is like the sort of what you're going to look at when you click on this particular area, right? So in this case, we're looking at accountability measures, so there's some descriptors as to what those measures are and where they're identified in law, where that comes into play, as well as some data notes. And the data notes are sort of the descriptors around the parameters by which we're looking and consuming the data, what limitations we're looking at, various information to help you understand what you're looking at. And then in the report, you'll see on the top right there, you'll see in this report essentially the same things that you see across the top. And those are the different pages that are related to EPP accountability measures. The other thing to know is as we standardize this and go forward, as you're looking from left to right along the top, we will go from the smallest granular size that we can provide to more state level as we get further over to the right. And again, this is sort of organic. As we get more and more information, and information over time will create additional dashboards going forward. But really quickly, let's just take a look at the single EPP detail. And again, we have this disaggregated by trees, and it's should be loading up here in just a second. But effectively, what we have here in any of these dashboards that we're producing along the top will be a descriptor of what you're looking at within the page, as well as in that top section, you should be able to click on a portion where it'll say, click here for additional information. And if you click on that, it will take you to sort of a how-to guide to help you see what you're looking at and how to consume it. So this is, again, thinking about this from a public standpoint, what you're looking at and how to interpret that data in meaningful ways. And we provide that essentially on any of these pages in the dashboard. Then when we go back to the overarching page here, and it seems to be a little quirky up here. It might have something to do with the help. Okay. All right. So it's sounding like we're having a couple of technical difficulties. So we'll just use the how-to guide to sort of walk you through this. Effectively, in this single EPP dashboard, what you'll see, and I'm looking carefully at the right side of the screen right now, you'll see the three overarching measures are listed, from left to right there. You'll see the teacher evaluation, or NESIS. You'll see student growth, I can't see it from my overhead position here. And then the third area would be, is that evaluation? I can't read it. It's satisfaction. Okay. Oh, I don't think I can take that back there. Anyway, so we have the overarching rates that are provided there, and then we also disaggregate that by race, gender, and ethnicity, where we have a sample size of 10 or more. Again, this is following the rules that this body recommended to the board and the board ultimately approved. And then we color code that information so that it's easy to consume in terms of whether you're high flying, you would be level 4, to a sanctionable situation where you would be a level 1. And according to 107 rules, an EPP is held accountable not just at the overall, which would be along the left side of that visual, but any of those subcategories that may fall under a level 1 status could warrant a potential sanction as well. So the point here is that you can very quickly consume a deep dive as to a variety of the demographics that you have available to you. Now, if you were an institution that was very small and you didn't have a sample size that met at an N of 10 over 3 years, or so you would have nothing essentially on the right side. You would still have your overall measure along the far left. And again, we made a small sample size rule that says if you don't have sufficient data, you're still going to be held to that level in aggregate over 3 years. So that's again, I apologize for not being able to show you the interactiveness at this time. But that's the single EPP dashboard. From there, we can look at a comparison. So one of the things that's in 986 is that we develop a dashboard that is easy to interact across EPPs. And so if we pull up the how-to section as well here, here we'll see essentially what you can do is you can grab any portion of EPPs that you wanted to look at. So in the main dashboard, you'll be able to see a list of all the EPPs along the left side. So if I wanted to look at all the HBCs, or if I wanted to look at all the EPPs in the west side of the state, or if I wanted to look at all the publics or all the privates, I could click on any of the schools that I wanted to look at, and it will pull up each EPP in a row so that you can see how one institution is comparing to another, or I should say EPP, how one EPP is faring relative to other EPPs. So again, quick, easy way to look at the three measures of accountability right now. And obviously, when we get to a point that there's a new accountability, weighted accountability model that ultimately gets approved by the board, that ultimately goes to the jail at EOC, that ultimately gets changed in law, this will all change. But this is sort of where we're at for the moment because it's in 107. The next thing that we can do is then we can start to look at data across the entire state. And so what you'll see here is a dashboard where each point that you see, each bullet that you see is effectively an EPP. And then you can highlight an EPP that you're interested in, and you'll be able to see where that EPP falls relative to its peers across the entire state. And then again, we have the color coding dashboard system there, so you can see where you fall in the level system as well. So again, this is a quick way to see how one particular EPP might fare relative to its peers across all the folks in the state. And let me see if there's anything else I can say on that. You can also disaggregate this information over years. So there's a button at the top that you'll be able to look at it over time, and then you can also disaggregate by race, gender, and ethnicity. And that's a particularly eye-opening experience. So when you look at disaggregating by race, gender, and ethnicity, you'll find that there are far fewer dots associated with EPPs that met or exceeded the threshold to be able to report that. Meaning that when you get into the smaller subgroups, there are less programs that have substantial amounts of those subgroups in their candidate pool. And then lastly, for all the fellow data nerds out there like myself, if you wanted to grab the data and be able to provide the data at your own institution in some other way than what we're providing, we have a way here where you can grab that data and upload it to your own system in terms of Excel spreadsheets and a variety of other descriptive data where you can cut the data in other ways that are more useful to you if we haven't provided it in a means that are already useful in its current state. So, point here is this is coming, and we will again work very hard over the coming weeks to work with colleagues out in the field to get what we think are the best presentations that we can going forward. We also want to make sure that we're in compliance with law going forward so that what we present is an accurate representation. And you'll be a part of this. I'll be sending e-blasts out, and Kim will be sending corresponding e-updates to you all to say, hey, go on this website. This is the test site for you to practice and explore new areas as we start to unfold them. So that's a quick update on that. Are there any questions out there about this?
Any questions?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. On behalf of the commission, I want to thank a commission member who is leaving Pepsi. Mr. Freebird McKinney has accepted a new position for the State Board of Education as Director of Government and Community Relations. We appreciate your hard work and dedication to the commission and congratulate you on your new role. Look forward to working with you. Thank you, commission members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for today's discussions and presentations. I remind commission members that our next monthly meeting will be held in this room, barring any further action with coronavirus, on Thursday, April 9th from 9 to 12. We have now completed our meeting, and unless there is additional business at this time, I would call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you for the motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Thank you. We are adjourned, and there is a subcommittee meeting coming up, and Dr. Evans needs about 5 minutes to transition, and then the subcommittee meeting will begin. Do what?
I have about 24 to transition.
Oh, okay. It's not until 12, so those of you involved in that, please stand by. Thanks.
Thank you.
Kim, that's
Oh, sorry. I cut Linda off.
Got a caller. And that was long.
I know, I warned you guys it was gonna be long.
But important. So we,
No, it's not. No, it's not licensed.
High School Athletic Association.
in a couple,